Seems like every couple of weeks we get a new legacy sequel, a follow-up to a franchise from decades past where the legacy actors return. Some of them have been awesome.
10 out of 10, masterpiece.
Others have been awful.
Ew.
Here are 10 legacy sequels that I think we still need. While I'm talking, be sure to join me down below in the comments section. Let me know which legacy sequels do you think we need, or are you totally done with legacy sequels and you want the trend to just end? Let me know down below in the comment section. Also, there is a companion video to this over on my Patreon page with 9 more legacy sequels that I would love to see. If you don't know, Patreon is a membership site where if you join at any level, 2 weekly live streams over there. I do a 90-minute Q&A every single week, as well as a box office show most weeks. Join at any level and you get access to that. That's as little as $2 per month, $21 per year, $5 per month. You get your name on my end card. And at the top tier, you can actually do a monthly 30-minute video chat with me. The information about that is all down below in the description. And let's get started. Kicking things off, The Mummy. Now, the original film came out in the late 90s and just propelled Brendan Fraser to the A-list and launched this franchise which delivered a series of fun adventure films that kind of hit on a bunch of different levels. They, of course, were fun adventures, they had action, they had comedy, they had romance, and they also had a little bit of horror elements, so it kind of touched on a lot of things and had very broad appeal, and at least the first 2 films were wildly successful. Also, the Mummy franchise is what launched The Rock's movie career, where he showed up as the Scorpion King, the villain in part 2, and then went off to have his own spin-off film. And so when you kind of look at where things are at now, with Brendan Fraser having this career renaissance from The Whale, then being in Killers of the Flower Moon, winning an Oscar, and you look at The Rock being one of the biggest movie stars in the entire world, the timing just feels kind of right. It's over 25 years since the original film. Their kids would be grown up, but they're not so old that they can't still get involved in all of the action. So you can have this multi-generational adventure. You can find some excuse to why the Scorpion King makes a return and tie all of that into it. And I think there's just a lot of potential here for a movie that is just a really fun adventure film in a genre that a lot of people enjoy, but also hits a lot of strong emotional beats in there, and it's just the right amount of nostalgia without needing to just be member-bearing. Next up, Raimi Spider-Man 4. So in the case of this film, I actually made a full video with my pitch for what I would do for a Raimi Spider-Man 4 back in the tail end of 2019, where there was a brief window of time where Sony and Marvel Studios broke up. They weren't going to do No Way Home together. And so I put out a video pitching my idea for a next Spider-Man movie, and it involved Tobey Maguire and him later on in life and what that would look like. I love seeing characters at different phases of life, and so seeing this older, more mature Peter Parker, that's really interesting to me. And so you can check that video out wherever it is around here with the full plot pitch, the character arc, the emotional journey, the villains, the side characters that make some appearances in there. It was a lot of fun to put that one together. But also, if you kind of look at what Sony's doing, they kind of love to exploit the Spider-Man brand. And if the options are on the table are that we do a bunch of Spider-Man villain movies without Spider-Man in them that like beat around the Peter Parker bush extensively without ever saying his name, or we decide to go full, like we'll have Holland 4, we'll have Maguire 4, we'll have Spider-Verse 3 all at the same time. I'd much rather have this option. Give me the versions of Spider-Man that I love that are actually Spider-Man projects, and if they're all running at the same time, cool. You did multiple great jobs at casting your Spider-Man movies. Sure, let's do this weird thing. We've got multiple continuities at the same time. DC's doing it, and Well, maybe DC's not the best example of who to copy. Here's a fun one, Tron. You could make it a follow-up to the original 1980 film. You could de-age Jeff Bridges. You could get Daft Punk to do the score. You could call it Tron Legacy.
Something very familiar about all this.
Next, Kill Bill Volume 3. This one was fully set up in the original films where you have the bride show up to kill Vernita Green, and her daughter is there. And the mother sends her daughter upstairs. Fight breaks out. The bride wins. Mother gets stabbed in the chest. Daughter, Nikia, comes downstairs, see this, and the bride even says to her,
"When you grow up, if you still feel raw about it, I'll be waiting."
So, it established a legacy sequel in the movie that fully makes sense and reverses the formula of where you create the situation where the person that's on the run trying to get the revenge is this other girl, and the bride, Beatrix, is the one that is in fact trying to stay alive, and you just play that out. We've got a handful of surviving characters from the original run and a few different things that you can kind of do with this and see where the characters are at. But, I mean, it's all right there. It's all ready to go. Even some of the actors have been asked recently, like, who would you cast? And Vivica A. Fox is like, yeah, get Zendaya as the star out for revenge. Like, you go, all right, this, like, it's all right here. It's ready to go. 7, The Lion King. Now, The Lion King is my favorite animated film of all time. Obviously, they decided to do a live action, beat for beat, but not actually live action remake of the film. And now they're doing a prequel to the live action remake that's not actually live action. But I think built into it, you can always just take the story forward a generation. By now, it's been 30 years. Simba is not just grown up. Simba is now old, has his own grown-up children. And there's always new tales to be told about the lion who is a king and the passing from one generation to the next and the challenges that they face. And so you get to see Simba. Perhaps in this sequel, he's now the Mufasa of this world. He's old and wise, and he's had many adventures, and some of them maybe even tie in some of our direct-to-video adventures that have happened in our TV shows, to where he's, like, in his final days, and his children have grown up. And you pick a different writing or story from Shakespeare that we're going to adapt in this lion context. Like, I think there's something there. And you just find this deep, rich story, and you get the full epic journey of Simba's life, as well as the new tale for a new generation. Here's a fun one, Starship Troopers. So the original Starship Troopers came out back in 1997, kind of misunderstood, like people didn't pick up on the very obvious satire that Paul Verhoeven was going for and thought it was promoting all of the things that it was making fun of. And then we got 4 different direct-to-video sequels for it. They're all in continuity, but feels like the sort of one that jumped forward now over 25 years. The technology's there that you can actually pull a lot of this stuff off a little bit better. But if you stop and think about all the things that have happened in the world since the original Starship Troopers came out, 9/11, Patriot Act, all countless, endless wars overseas, COVID, all of the government reactions to all of this, just ripe for satire in the world of Starship Troopers. And that's what good satire does. It's able to tell this thrilling, wild adventure about troopers in starships killing bugs while also holding up a mirror and making fun of all the ridiculous things that happen in the real world. It entertains while also challenging, and that's what you need to do. And in the world of Starship Troopers, hey, all right, let's bring back Casper Van Dien. I'd love to see Rico all grown up. Now it's the guy that's in charge of all the troops in live action once again all these years later as the war continues on endlessly as it's marching onward. I think there's just a lot there. The technology's caught up so it could look a lot cooler. And like I said, I think it's just ripe for that social commentary, the satire that's just biting, brutal, goes after everyone, rips everyone apart, also have bugs rip everyone apart in its irreverent fashion as it has before. It can be hilarious, exciting, thrilling, ridiculous, all of it. Today's video is brought to you by BetterHelp. If you don't know my story, when I started my YouTube channel, I was unemployed and in alcohol addiction treatment. And my addiction issues came about because I just had a tremendous amount of stress in my life, and I coped with that stress through drinking. I wish 10 years ago I had turned to therapy instead of alcohol. Therapy could have helped me develop proper coping skills for all the stress that I was facing, and it could have helped me steer my life away from really toxic patterns. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. Learn to make time for what makes you happy with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/Sean Chandler today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/Sean Chandler. Then we have The Mask of Zorro. This is a great swashbuckler from the late 90s starring Antonio Banderas, Anthony Hopkins, and the breakout role for Catherine Zeta-Jones. And Antonio Banderas is now older than Anthony Hopkins was when they made that film. And that movie was kind of designed as a kind of a passing of the torch training film. And you could do that again now. That decades later, new tyranny has emerged in the community, and our aging Zorro must pass the sword and the mask on to the next generation, whoever that this new Zorro will be. And in this context to where it was handed to him and now he passes it on again, it just kind of gives this weight to it that it is a true legacy. The mask isn't about the man. It's about the legacy. It's about the mission. It's about fighting injustice. Antonio Banderas has still got it. Like, he's still doing action movies, showing up in things here and there. And so he could still have his role that he plays in it while also getting that right person to be our new Zorro to take on the mantle once again. Especially because it is this one where it's been passed on before. Something really special about that. King Conan. This is another one absolutely set up in the original film. At the end of Conan the Barbarian, it literally has a whole scroll about what Conan has been up to. You see Conan as an old man on a throne, and it says,
"He became a king by his own hand. This story shall also be told."
Tells us he's going to become a king, and it tells us it's a story to be told another day. Well, it's another day. And Arnold is now approaching 80, still in great shape by any normal people's standards, and he's almost certainly game to do it. And it's like a story that just ripe to do something different with the character, but returning to this barbaric world and get one final tale about King Conan seeing his ultimate conquest, his ultimate victory, and completing that arc from slave to barbarian to destroyer, and then finally is a king on the throne. Let's complete it. Let's do it. Third, Ninja Turtles. Let's go back to the 1990 Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Jump forward 35 years in the future. They're no longer teenagers. They're just Ninja Turtles in a different phase of life. And the Foot has come back with a vengeance into New York City. And they're still the same people. They're still got that energy to them. They still love pizza. It's still entertaining to see turtles as ninjas, but now they're in a very different phase of life. And what does that look like? There have been there's a very famous comic run from just a few years back, The Last Ronin, which tells a very dark version of aged Ninja Turtles. I don't want to go full Last Ronin just yet, because it's pretty bleak and you lose a really key element with The Last Ronin since he is the last Ronin and the last of our Ninja Turtles. But maybe you use my Ninja Turtles movie to set up doing The Last Ronin as a follow-up to it. And you just tell the story that is a more mature Ninja Turtles story, but keeps the fun, keeps the energy. We see what's come of April, Casey Jones. Where did that go anywhere? Did they have kids? All that fun stuff? That is answered once again in our last Ronin comic books. And so maybe you kind of play some of that out. I think there's a lot of potential there. As I've said many times, I love to see characters at different phases of life. When you define a series based off of their stage of life, it's particularly interesting to me to see where would they be at when they are very much not teenagers anymore. And is there some version of this where some of them, we find some more mutants out there, have some teenage mutant ninja kids come out of this, whatever that looks like? I don't know, but I think there's potential there. And I'm saying, let's go prosthetics. We're going back to the style. I don't want CGI 7-foot-tall bodybuilders. Let's really, truly keep the grittiness, the groundedness of that original 1990 run. Next to last on here, A Nightmare on Elm Street. Let's give us one final nightmare. Robert Englund, he's in his 70s, but he's still got enough left in him to do this. And like, if you've ever been to a horror convention where Robert Englund is there, I haven't been, but my neighbor has. There are just endless crowds of people that love Robert Englund as this character. And what if we could get one final adventure with him back as Freddy Krueger? Let's pull into every piece of lore that we can. Let's bring Nancy back. Let's go back to Elm Street and just do this all out final true nightmare where you have all the best of modern technology, but let's use lots of practical effects at the same time. Really go into dreams, do every nightmare, freakish scenario you can, and close out that original timeline for good. Maybe burn Elm Street to the ground in the dream world as well as in the real world, so there is no more Elm Street to have a nightmare on in the future, because Freddy's been ultimately defeated, but it has cost us our Elm Street. I think that's one where, like, we're gonna do bring back Nightmare on Elm Street. We still got Robert Englund. Let's do it one more time. Let's have one final adventure with. Finally, Back to the Future. If you haven't already clicked the dislike button, here's your opportunity to do it as I try and milk a little bit more out of the Back to the Future franchise. I don't know that there's any way to actually pull off the movie that I'm about to pitch to you, but as I have said 1,000 times before on my channel, I think that the Back to the Future franchise is actually ripe for a sequel or a remake. Simply put, the Back to the Future concept is fresh, new, and interesting every new generation. The original one was interesting because it was about a 1980s high schooler going back into the 1950s and meeting his parents. That's always an interesting concept, and it's different every generation because the 80s to the 50s, that's totally different from a high schooler of the 20s going back to the zeros, the 90s, or the 80s. And if we got to do it legacy sequel style, let's have the kids of Marty, our high schoolers in the 20s, going back into the 80s to meet 1980s Marty. So what if we find this insane multi-layered time travel story? Maybe it's got to be told across multiple different films where through the events of our film, modern day high schoolers go back and cause 80s Marty not to meet Jennifer, also not to meet Doc Brown, so he doesn't go back in time. Whole timeline is destroyed because of this, so we end up having to go back into the 1950s and fix that movie, fix the 1980s movie, while we're hopping all throughout time, poking fun at modern day high schoolers. How would they respond to high school in the 80s? How would they respond to high school maybe in the 90s, high school in the 50s? All of this crazy stuff, time travel, characters on top of characters, seeing into the events of other movies, all of it bonkers as can be. We're doing Back to the Future. We're doing Back to the Future 2. We're commenting on the fact that all the stuff that they thought was going to happen in 2015 with flying cars didn't happen. And you have a reason in the continuity with the timeline getting screwed up, explaining why floating cars didn't end up happening, or our self-lacing shoes, or our resizable jackets. All of this is on the table to poke meta jokes. All of it. It'll be incredible. It'll cost $1 billion to be able to pull off all of the de-aging, deep fakes, everything that we want to pull off in this deal. It will be the greatest legacy sequel of all time. It will be the greatest movie of all time. It will be the most meta movie of all time, simply because I said I don't know what I'm doing anymore. I just think there's a lot of room with Back to the Future to tell new fun stories. So it comes in at number 1 on this list where numbers don't mean anything. If you want more of this insanity, remember there's a companion video over on Patreon with 9 more legacy sequels that I would love to see. Thank you so much for watching, and keep talking movies and TV.